then. Good morning if you're on the east coast of America, and good afternoon or evening, depending on where else you're calling in from. It's a great pleasure to be chairing this panel on the subject of youth and the NPT, hosted jointly by the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs and BASIC. My name is Sebastian Brixey-Williams, and I'm the co-director of BASIC, a think tank headquartered in London, which promotes meaningful dialogue amongst officials and experts to build trust, to reduce nuclear risks and advance disarmament. Before I say a few words about this event, I'm going to ask that all participants in the call, beyond those who are on the panel, to please mute your microphones and disable your camera. You can find this in a little dashboard at the bottom of the screen. Just make sure those are off. The idea for this event grew out of a conversation between BASIC and UNODA earlier this year, and is a meeting between two mutually reinforcing programs of work. On the one hand, you have the UN's new Youth for Disarmament program being coordinated by UNODA, and that's developed from the recent resolution on youth non-proliferation and disarmament, which I'm sure we'll hear a bit more about today. On the other hand, you have BASIC's Gender, Youth and Diversity program, which aims to broaden demographic and cognitive diversity in the nuclear policy field, and with it, bring fresh ideas, creative problem solving, and more inclusive outcomes. Both today's event and the Next Generation Forum event at the Npt Review Conference, which we hope will take place next year, come under that programme. So watch this space because we have more exciting work on this area. And if you'd like to talk more about opportunities to partner or just to take part, then please do email me. My email is found on our website, www.basicint.org. Today is an apposite moment to host this event because 2020 marks the 50th anniversary of the entry into force of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or the NPT, as well as 25 years of its indefinite extension from 1995. Today also marks the anniversary of the advent of the atomic age, because 75 years ago today, the United States conducted the Trinity test, their first nuclear test. Yet, in spite of the regime's longevity, there are ongoing concerns about its health, with progress on disarmaments being slow, with the bilateral arms control architecture between the United States and Russia eroding, and our own work and the work of others have demonstrated that there is a widespread perception that nuclear risks are rising. The future of health and vitality of the NPT regime over the next quarter century will depend on how it is stewarded, and upon securing the commitment of the next generation of ethically motivated young professionals, whether they're policy analysts, researchers, entrepreneurs, politicians, civil society representatives, artists, or government officials. So that's you in the audience. I'm joined today by four excellent panelists. First up, we'll have Izumi Nakamitsu, United Nations High Representative for Disarmament Affairs. Following, we'll have His Excellency Gustavo Savinen, President-Designate of the 10th NPT Review Conference. We'll then turn to His Excellency Cho Hyun, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations. And the Republic of Korea was the country that drafted the recent Youth Disarmament and Non-Proliferation Resolution. And finally, we'll turn to Ms. Bianca Carpenelli, who's been organizing the Latin America NPT Next Generation Network. We had also hoped to have Ms. Sarah Bidgood from the James Martin Center for Non-Proliferation Studies, who has a really long-standing interest and commitment to supporting young people in the field. But due to some unforeseen circumstances, she won't be able to join us today, and we very much hope to have her at a future event. So before kicking off, I'll just ask again, could all participants please mute your microphones and disable your cameras? The event, I should say, is on the record and is being recorded. Each speaker will speak for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then at the end, we'll take some questions. So without further ado, thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy today's event. Over to you, Izumi.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, but most importantly, UN Youth Champions for Disarmament, and of course, young people in the audience. It is indeed a great pleasure. It's exciting for me to speak today at this webinar on youth and the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, or NPT. This event sits at the intersection of one of my office's most important priorities to support the review process of the NPT, and of course, one of our most dynamic, I should say, new work streams, youth and disarmament. Now, I know everyone knows already, but in his disarmament agenda, securing our common future, the Secretary General recognized that young people, there's some noise. Yes, it stopped. In his agenda for disarmament, the Secretary General recognized that young people can act as a tremendous force for global change. And of course, we know that youth movements have often included perspectives such as those from victims and affected communities, indigenous and underrepresented populations, whose input has not always been present in discussions on nuclear disarmament and the NPT. So he committed, the Secretary General, to further investing in youth education and in establishing a platform for youth engagement. And of course, it is incumbent upon my generation, older generation, not only to provide young people with education and training opportunities, but also to listen and take into account their perspectives. So this renewed focus on the role of youth in disarmament is also supported by UN member states. Last year's resolution 74/64 on youth disarmament and non-proliferation, the General Assembly encouraged the meaningful and inclusive participation of young people in discussions in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation, and stressed the importance of education and capacity building. Now, Tuesday this week, the UN Security Council also adopted Resolution 2535 on youth, peace, and security. And apparently, this is the third such resolution. It encourages member states to support and integrate youth into decision-making processes and recognizes the unique role youth can play in strengthening the national, local, and community-based capacities in conflict and post-conflict situations. In the UN Office for Disarmament Affairs, we are stepping up our youth engagement across the spectrum of our activities. We want to increase youth participation and create space for young people to make meaningful and substantive contributions to facilitating progress in disarmament. My office is engaging education and empowering young people through an outreach initiative, and I'm pretty sure you already know it, #Youth for Disarmament, under which various resources, including e-newsletters, training programs, and dedicated youth websites are made available. We have also recently announced a very exciting initiative, our first group of youth champions for the United Nations Disarmament Training Program. And I am really pleased that many of those champions are with us today in this webinar. During the course of the program, they will receive training and in general principles of disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control through online courses, and a 2-week in-person study tour in Vienna, Geneva, Hiroshima, and Nagasaki. They will exchange ideas with disarmament experts from think tanks, civil society organizations, and the diplomatic field, of course, and develop a plan to engage their communities on issues related to disarmament, non-proliferation, and arms control. The NPT review process is one area that could most certainly benefit from a new perspective that young people can bring. It is no secret, of course, that the last NPT review conference in 2015 was not able to agree on an outcome. And while everyone agrees that next review conference, tentatively scheduled for January next year, 2021, will be an important occasion, it faces, of course, multiple challenges. In order to overcome these challenges, it is vital that states parties listen to the world's younger generations. And after all, it is today's youth that will have to pay the price of a present generation's failure to rid the world of nuclear risk and to achieve the goal of a world free of nuclear weapons. The resolution is not to throw our hands up in despair and leave the problem for the next generation to solve, but rather to listen to their ideas and perspectives today. And I know that the President designate, His Excellency Ambassador Zoltning, is committed to ensuring this outcome. And I want to assure him and all states parties that Office for Disarmament Affairs is ready and willing to help whatever we can do. So I am very much looking forward to listening from my fellow panelists, as well as many young people in the audience today. And thank you very much for listening and looking forward to our exchanges. Over to you.
Thank you, Ms. Nakamitsu. I'll just remind people who've just joined the call in between the beginning, if you could just kindly turn off your microphones and your videos, we can keep the panelists on the screen. If anybody would like to just see the panelists, you can also press the little ... and there's an option to pin video, but you just need to remember to unpin the video at the end of their talk. So just a reminder to please turn off videos and microphones, because we can't do that centrally. Okay, so our next speaker is going to be His Excellency Gustavo Zlovinin, President Designate of the 10th Npt Review Conference. We've had a number of conversations about the importance of youth participation in the NPT. So delighted to hand over to him and hear your thoughts.
Thank you. Hi, Representative Mitsu, His Excellency Ambassador Hyun, Mr. Brixie Williams, Co-Director of BASIC, distinguished panelists, and dear representative of the younger generations. I would like to express firstly my sincere thanks to the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs, UNODA, and BASIC for organizing today's event. As the High Representative has already noted, these webinars continue to provide a way to discuss the major issues surrounding the 10th NPT Review Conference and to maintain momentum during this postponement caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Today's event is important for two reasons mainly. The first is that it falls on the 75th anniversary of the Trinity test, as Sebastian already, the very first test of a nuclear weapon. The environmental and human devastation caused by nuclear testing is a driving impetus to not only ban all nuclear tests, but also to eliminate all nuclear weapons. The second reason this event is important is because if the 10th Review Conference is to have a successful outcome and conclusion, it must listen to the voices of a diverse range of stakeholders. That means providing equitable and meaningful participation for women, space for civil society to express their views, an opportunity for industry to participate, and while we are here today, for the younger generation to have their say. To those of you tuning in to today's event, I want to also thank you for your interest and for your enthusiasm. Listening to young people is vital for several reasons. First, because the world's youth have a long and storied history of pushing boldly and working hard for causes that many deem to be, and more importantly, achieving great success in those causes. Second, because you bring different perspectives about the world and how to realize change. And finally, although they are not of your making, many of today's problems will also be yours to address. Sadly, it seems that the quest to eliminate nuclear weapons will be one of your inheritances. The war has made great strides in the attainment of this goal. But 3/4 of a century after the use of nuclear weapons against Hiroshima and Nagasaki, we still have a long way to go. So therefore, the questions are, how can the NPT help achieve this? What relevance does a half-a-century-old treaty continue to have in the face of a rapidly changing international environment? Why securing a successful conclusion of the 10th NPT Review Conference is important? Again, these are the questions, and I hope to answer today. As many of you will know, 2020 is a double anniversary for the NPT. It marks both 50 years since the NPT entered into force and 25 years since it was indefinitely extended. In the beginning, the NPT was envisaged as a stopgap measure of limited duration, one of several partial measures to achieve a progress on nuclear disarmament. But it has evolved into much more since. The NPT is now widely regarded as the cornerstone of the nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation framework and a pillar of international peace and security. It is one of the most enduring and successful multilateral treaties in history, and not just treaties related to security, but all treaties. Even countries who were implacably opposed to its negotiations have since become members. This status and success exists for three core reasons. First, under Article 6 of the treaty, the NPT contains legally binding commitments on its members to pursue nuclear disarmament, including the only such commitments on the 5 nuclear weapon states identified in the treaty. Second, the treaty imposes verifiable non-proliferation obligations on its members, implemented through the International Atomic Energy Agency's safeguards system. And third, the NPT is near universal in its membership. 191 countries have joined the treaty, meaning that its commitments and obligations are binding on almost all of the international community. Under the auspices of the NPT, as I said before, disarmament has moved forward. The massive reductions in nuclear weapon stockpiles were all couched as effective measures under Article 6 of the treaty. Efforts to ban nuclear testing and create nuclear weapons-free zones have all taken impetus from the treaty as well. In the 1960s, it was predicted that by the turn of the century, there will be more than 20 new nuclear armed states. That this has not happened is due to the NPT and its safeguards system. And the treaty continues to produce real security benefits for all its members, a key driver behind its longevity. The NPT was always intended as a bargain between 3 mutually reinforcing pillars: disarmament, non-proliferation, and the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, all in the service of the treaty's ultimate ambition, a world free of nuclear weapons. This third pillar, facilitating access to nuclear science, technology, and energy, has been crucial to building support for the first 2 pillars. Under the NPT's auspices, the IAEA has facilitated the adoption of day-to-day applications of nuclear science and technology in fields as diverse as energy, health, agriculture, drinking water, protection of fisheries, understanding climate change, and oceans. So the mutually reinforcing and balanced nature of NPT's grand bargain was solidified with the treaty's indefinite extension in 1995. A strengthened review process of 5 yearly review conferences with 3 preparatory committee meetings was designed to enable state parties to look forward and identify the areas in which and the means through which further progress should be thought in the future. The review conferences, in particular those in 2000 and 2010, have produced commitments to increase transparency, promote trust, and reduce the risk of nuclear war, facilitated efforts to make the peaceful use of nuclear energy safer and more secure, and addressed the proliferation challenges of the day. Half a century after its entry into force, the NPT is a multilateral forum for nuclear disarmament and for dialogue on some of the most pressing international security issues we have. That role of the treaty is as necessary today as ever. The dangers posed by the potential use of nuclear weapons and nuclear proliferation are growing. The increasing tensions between nuclear-armed states has led to a resurgence in the reliance on nuclear weapons. At the same time, many of the treaties negotiated to prevent the use of nuclear weapons are being abandoned without anything to replace them. The 10th NPT Review Conference provides an opportunity for its parties to consider how to reverse these trends through the strengthened implementation of the treaty. At the same time, look forward and consider how progress can be made and emerging threats confronted. As President-designate, it is not my job to prescribe what an outcome from the review conference should look like. That is entirely the prerogative of the NPT's state parties. But it is my responsibility to facilitate an outcome that reflects all state parties' interests and that is balanced across all three of the NPT's pillars. It would include practical ideas to strengthen implementation of each pillar in the near, medium, and long term, and it will build upon and reinforce the outcomes from the 1995, 2000, and 2010 review conferences, including the commitments made at those review conferences. Preventing the use of nuclear weapons and seeking their elimination, while ensuring non-proliferation and benefiting from the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, is one of the greatest challenges confronting humanity. But I believe we can make progress today. I look to you, the youth of the world, for your talent and ambition, for your imagination, determination, and strength. And I now look forward to hearing your ideas and suggestions. And of course, I will be happy to answer any of your questions. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. That's really helpful, and we will certainly get to questions from the audience in due time, where I certainly hope we'll hear a lot about your ideas in the audience. Our next speaker is His Excellency Ambassador Cho Hyun, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Korea to the United Nations. Over to you, Ambassador.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for organizing this meaningful event. Students, ladies and gentlemen, well, diplomats at the United Nations, as Undersecretary General Nakamitsu has said, are in deep trouble because of the COVID-19. So many problems, but above all, there is an increasing number of virtual meetings. So some of us said that this is another proliferation issue, a serious problem. Absolutely, as a result, there is Zoom fatigueness, but because of the young and bright participants today, I'm sure that there is no such thing as fatigueness. Well, Mr. Chair, as you have said, the year 2020 deserves a special attention as it marks the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, as well as the 50th anniversary of the NPT's entry into force. However, we are facing challenging times with the COVID-19 pandemic still raging and disrupting plans and celebrations for this year and beyond. Our agenda on disarmament and non-proliferation was postponed for the very first time, putting a temporary halt on our hard work for the last half century. In this regard, I believe that an event like this is very timely because we can reaffirm that the NPT has been the cornerstone of the global disarmament and non-proliferation regime. It is also meaningful as it maintains the momentum for the success of the 10th NPT review early next year. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now look at another reality other than this pandemic. The prospect for further nuclear arms reduction and non-proliferation seems relatively bleak, and we are even witnessing a rollback of the hard-won achievements of the past, and nuclear weapons still continue to pose the greatest threat to humanity and our planet, although we have clearly witnessed that investments in these weapons will not strengthen security nor protect the people from current challenges like COVID-19. Risks related to their usage stemming from both proliferation and miscalculation seem to be dangerously expanding as nationalism grows while multilateralism and relevant institutions and treaties face increasing skepticism. As such, we must reinvigorate our common efforts in this important sphere. Against this backdrop, we believe that enhanced youth engagement and action is simply essential for doing so. In the same vein, the Republic of Korea, the role of the youth has been always on the center stage, not just for this issue, but also in overcoming the major challenges of our country. Student protests helped end military rule and usher in democracy. And young people, as innovative entrepreneurs and honest workers, were integral in transforming our country's economy, one of the poorest ones, into the one of the top world economic powerhouse within a single generation. They also speak out against various forms of discrimination and social injustice, and of course, recently, climate change. It is based on this belief that the Republic of Korea has been proudly championing youth engagement in the field of disarmament. This includes tabling a resolution on youth in the UN General Assembly First Committee for the first time in history last year, as President just mentioned earlier. This landmark resolution recognizes that youth are key agents for social change, economic development, and technological innovation. They also play the important role of civil society in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation. In line with these efforts to further strengthen youth engagement, Korea held a 2020 Youth Npt Conference in Seoul just last week, with the participation of around 50 university students. This event was particularly meaningful in the sense that it was the first large-scale in-person meeting held since the outbreak of COVID-19. During this conference, young participants exerted their utmost efforts in reflecting the interests of each country they were representing, and they succeeded in adopting the final document by consensus. Madam Nagamitsu, If only we diplomats at the United Nations can emulate them. I was amazed to see the passion of the youth to come to an agreement, and there are various creative proposals that would give fresh air in the long-stalled nuclear disarmament. These ideas included introducing a quota system in nuclear disarmament, consideration of the current quantity in stockpile and their efforts to dismantle nuclear weapons, a peer review mechanism for nuclear disarmament, and holding a nuclear disarmament summit, among many others. I hope these will be considered in your deliberations, Mr. President. Well, Mr. Chair, with your permission, I will show you a short video slip on this conference right after my statement. I'm confident that the role of youth, as we have seen in Korea, in the disarmament and non-proliferation will contribute to not only in terms of securing diversity, but more importantly, envisioning a better world without nuclear weapons, as I have just introduced in the ideas we collected from the Npt conference, youth conference in Seoul. The Republic of Korea, therefore, will continue to engage and expand the active participation of young people in this sphere. And I look forward to hearing from you today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ambassador.
2020년 정년 모의 NPT 회의에 참석하신 여러분 모두를 환영합니다.
Despite the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, I am gratified to see that young participants have continued work and are meeting today to discuss ideas on how to strengthen the NPT.
This includes listening to you, the next generation, the future stewards of international peace and security.
지금부터 2020 청년 모의 NPT 회의를 시작하겠습니다.
For the past 50 years, NPT has made a significant contribution to the overall peace and security. My delegation believes that the biggest task of today's conference is to build a new momentum for nuclear disarmament according to Article 6 and to rebuild trust among states parties.
We wish all states to agree on the effort to make substantial progress. Second, is achieving the universality of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, TPNW. New Zealand ratified this treaty as early as 2018, bearing in mind of the first resolution of the General Assembly of the United Nations adopted on 24th January 1946.
Egypt deeply regrets our continual failure in realizing the resolution adopted by the 1995 Review and Extension Conference. The creation of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East is the utmost priority for the Egyptian delegation.
본 프랑스 대표단은 제1조에 대해 핵군 축의 점진적 단계적 진전에 동의합니다.
이의가 없으므로 이번 회의의 최종 문서로 NPT-Youth Conference 2020-CRP1 Rev2를 최종 문서로 채택하도록 하겠습니다.
Well, that's tremendous to see such active work going on in South Korea, and I really hope that participants feel inspired by that video and consider that perhaps this is something that they can reproduce in their own countries. I'm going to turn now to our final speaker before we turn to questions. Our final speaker has been actively involved in organising NPT Next Generation Networks, Ms. Bianca Carpenelli. She's the coordinator of the Latin America NPT Next Generation Network. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, participants and panelists. It's an honor to be participating in this event, of course. And in the first place, let me thank you, the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs and BASIC for organizing this valuable instance, and Mr. Ambassador Slovinen for his support to my work towards creating this next generation network, especially in Latin America. Let me start saying that we are a very special generation, and we know we are a very special generation. Why? Because we are fully conscious about the challenges we are going to be facing in the incoming years when the time comes for us to turn from young professionals and students into decision makers. This is so mainly because we are the first generation that is so forewarned about what is going to happen in regard to this century's most pressing problems, such as climate change, food shortage, and drastic changes in the world order with the rise of new superpowers. And it is absolutely clear that we cannot and we must not fail in addressing these issues in the near future. In that sense, it is totally necessary that we young professionals and students start getting immersed in these matters now, not wasting any time, and in order to be as prepared as possible when the time comes for us to turn into decision makers. The NPT, as the foundational element and legal instrument of the non-proliferation regime, has set essential precedents under its three pillars: non-proliferation, disarmament, and the peaceful uses of nuclear energy, becoming a leading stability component within international dynamics. Engaging young professionals and students with the non-proliferation regime from an early stage is key for its sustainability. The rationale is simple: substantial and qualified engagement with the future custodians of the treaty is key to its sustainability in the next 50 years. Exactly a year ago, the NPT Next Generation Forum idea was launched, and I assumed the compromise of generating a Latin American network of young professionals and students to think and discuss about the three pillars of the NPT, and also to identify opportunities for progress on key NPT issue areas, to think about how to foster the dialogue between young professionals and students and already consolidated experts in the field, and also to discuss how to develop a strong network of next generation delegates ready to work towards the advancement of the NPT regime. This Latin American section of the NPT Next Generation Forum gathered a group of 12 next generation representatives acting across the region, but also in different areas within the nuclear sector. Between 2019 and 2020, these 12 representatives participated in a series of virtual workshops facilitated by myself and by Ms. Bianca. If you're there, thank you so much for collaborating in this initiative as well. And what we did in these virtual workshops is to discuss about the next 50 years of the treaty using design thinking strategies, and concluding in an output document that contains not only solid conclusions, but also concrete action proposals to start working now. Let me thank also Lucas Perez Florentino from Brazil for working with me to finalize this outcome document as well. But what I want to emphasize about this Latin American Roundtable that I had the honor to coordinate is that I prioritized to engage young professionals and students from different areas within the nuclear sector. I invited young diplomats and young government officials, of course, but also young professionals working in the nuclear industry, young researchers working in R&D, and also young professionals working in academia and students as well. My vision is that only integrating all the different areas within the nuclear sector in the same discussion table, we are going to get the full picture and start integrating the sector in our generation to move forward. Summarizing, I'm looking forward to keep working in this direction towards the next generation forum at the sites of the upcoming NPT review conference, with the aim of integrating young professionals and students from different areas of the nuclear sector, but also fostering a solid intergenerational dialogue to prepare next generations to take leading roles and to incorporate as well new ideas of inclusiveness, of environmental sustainability, and of global solidarity as fresh insights coming from this new generation to the international policy arena. I'm also looking forward to potentially institutionalizing this network in a way that we can work in an even more solid and organized way towards these objectives of youth engagement. In this sense, to finish off, let me thank again the UN Office of Disarmament Affairs and BASIC for organizing this valuable instance, and Mr. Ambassador Slovinen for his support. And I'm looking forward to actively keep working in this direction in the incoming months. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Thank you, Bianca. Well, we've heard 4 speeches today about initiatives underway within the NPT regime to build youth engagement in the treaty. So I'm delighted now to open the floor to questions. We have about 45 minutes. There's a few principles for asking questions. So please, if you wish to speak, just write your question out in the chat. You can find the chat in the same place that it's called the conversation, in the same place that you can mute your microphone. It's just a little further along on the bar. And I'll get to you in order. Please unmute and turn on your camera when you're speaking, obviously, but then please remember to mute and turn off your camera when you stop speaking. We ask participants to limit their interventions to about 45 seconds if you can, so no long speeches, please. And we'll take a handful of questions and comments before going back to the panel. So I'm going to abuse my chair's privilege to ask the first question here. In fact, 2 questions, one to the panel, one to the audience. So to the panel, the Youth Disarmament and Youth Non-Proliferation and Disarmament Resolution is obviously a huge achievement, and it opens up a lot of exciting possibilities. But it's also perhaps the first step. So I'd like to ask the panel what's next, and really how do we scale up what we've started with to get a really sustained and impactful engagement from youth in the Non-Proliferation Treaty. To the young people in the audience, I want to say this. You have a fantastic panel of high-level professionals in the field who are sitting here ready to consider your proposals and answer your questions. So I'd ask you, as young people in the audience, to tell our panel what you think will strengthen the NPT regime and the wider global nuclear order. I'll pass over to Ms. Nakamitsu, if she's happy for me to do that, and we'll go through the order that they spoke.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the question. Indeed, this is only the first step. I think, as I mentioned already in my remark, it was a huge achievement thanks to Republic of Korea and other co-sponsoring member states of the United Nations. We now do have this resolution, which really tells us that the international community recognizes the importance of young people participating in this, if you will, movement. So, in order for us to be able to enable young people so that they will be able to contribute meaningfully and substantively, we think that young people should be connecting with each other. Young people should be able to access the platforms and opportunities that where they will be able to obtain expert knowledge, both in terms of knowledge, but also skills. What kind of skills that they should have that will be useful for them to have, for them to become a meaningful and substantive contributors in these broader movements. I mentioned a couple of our initiatives within the ODA. We also know that a lot of organizations around the world are taking initiatives to create platforms and networks. I think this is, I have started to say something. This is just my personal observation in the past, let's say, a year or so. As you know, the United Nations was a creation on the basis of, it started with two visionary leaders more than 75 years ago, in fact, US and UK, Roosevelt and Churchill. It was very much a top-down vision that created the United Nations to be able to have an important role in the maintenance of international peace and security. And of course, I work for that organization, and I think the UN and multilateralism in general still means really very important mechanism in today's world, in the 21st century. But just looking at the Me Too, the Fridays for Future, and now, of course, Black Lives Matter, I think, we are in a transformative period. We are transitioning into something new in the world. And I see those movements and the young people at the core of those movements that are really beginning to transform the way we live, how the society is structured. And I would like something similar in international security as well. In order for that to happen, people need to be equipped and armed with a proper, useful knowledge, expertise, and also skills. And our role as an international organization is to enable younger people to be able to access those necessary skill sets and the knowledge. So for me, the important next step is exactly that. And it is a really exciting field of work that we are starting with the support of a lot of member states, but also organizations like yourself, BASIC, and there are others around the world. So let us take those next steps so that we will be able to transform and further develop the concept of security that fits in the 21st century. And therefore, you are at the core of that movement.
Ms. Nakamitsu, thank you. So I've already got 8 questions lined up on my list. So I think what we'll do is we'll take a few from the audience first, so the audience gets to start talking. And if any of the other 3 panelists have some thoughts on my question, then feel free to throw them in. So I'll turn first to Amir Nasir.
Yes. Mr. Chair, may I respond to your question?
What I'll do is, if you'd like to respond to mine, we'll take a few questions and respond to all of them at once. Would that be okay?
As I'm about to leave soon, may I respond to your question? Yeah.
In that case, yes.
Well, what's next? What's next for the young people? I believe young people here are all citizens of each and every sovereign states. And as a citizen, you will call to your leaders to respect NPT. And as you grow old, or as we become more influential in the future, you will never forget about the importance of the NPT, the ideals of the NPT. In general, I think young people should overcome the nationalistic sentiments in your own countries and see all the issues from a global perspective. In specific, let's stick to the principles of the NPT, and as leaders of your countries, you will try to uphold the NPT and develop it further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. And I'm wishing you a good day. So I'll turn now to our first question from the audience, from Amir Nasir.
Thank you, Sebastian, for your facilitation, and I hope you are well. It's good to see you. Thank you to the UN ODA, USD Zumina Kalmitso, President Designated Ambassador Gustavo Slovinen, and all panelists for their presentation. There is no doubt that we will soon pass the baton to the next generation in our collective endeavor to strive for a world free of nuclear weapons. I wish to refer to a recent informal virtual discussion or workshop on nuclear weapon free zones, where during that workshop it's quite clear that there are many ongoing initiatives and seminars already in place for the youth in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean, discussing the Treaty of Tlatelolco. And I think that is very logical, because the treaty is the oldest treaty on nuclear weapon free zone in the world. And of course, in my region, Southeast Asia, we have the Southeast Asia nuclear weapon free zones and many other nuclear weapon free zones around the world. And I think there is great value and significance for cross-regional exchanges, where the youth from one region could learn from the youth on the other side of the world. My question to all panelists is that what could we do from the perspective of government officials, as well as other important stakeholders, to encourage and facilitate better engagement and linkage to allow that cross-regional learning and collaboration among the youth around the world on the topic of nuclear weapon free zones specifically, as well as other topics within the ambit of the NPT at large. Thank you, Sebastian.
Thank you, Amir. That's great. I'm going to pass over to Belen Bianco.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time and for taking questions of the audience. My name is Belen Bianco. I have had the luxury to work with Bianca. I know Mr. Ambassador Slovinen, and I have also worked for the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs as an intern. So I know how much you all work really hard to move this topic forward. But in my own personal capacity, I have a question to the High Representative, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, and for Ambassador Slovinen, in a personal nature. I'm wondering whether in this context of COVID-19 crisis and with the economic hardships that Mr. Slovinen mentioned that countries will be facing in the near coming months and near future, and possible retrenchment to unilateralism, what can people do or young people do to support your work, to keep this topic moving forward, to raise awareness of the importance of talking about nuclear disarmament, even though this might be less visible than the economic hardship, it's not a less important topic. In particular, just preparing for the 2020 RevCom. Yeah, I guess maybe my question is more related to what can we do to help you do your work and succeed?
Great, thank you, Belen. I'll pass over to Orion Noda. Good to hear from you, Orion.
Hi all, thank you all for organizing this. This is an amazing event. I have a question to all participants. Many of you spoke about the 3 pillars of the NPT, yet the general feeling from the non-nuclear weapon states is that one of them, non-proliferation, is often prioritized over the others. And despite a decrease in the number of nuclear weapons over the years, we have witnessed a process of modernization and incorporation of new technologies in nuclear weapons, which would fall into the category of a sort of qualitative proliferation. Furthermore, reducing the numbers but maintaining or even increasing the importance of nuclear weapons is also a form of symbolic proliferation of the value of nuclear weapons. So my question is, how can UNODA and the NPT act to counter that? And how does it see itself engaging with the TPNW in this manner? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll pass over now to Palesa Mogorossi.
Greetings to all. My question is, well, firstly, I'd like to make an observation. I think that my comment is that I've come across a lot of treaties and I haven't really found a treaty process regulating military spending specifically. I've learned that the United Nations report on military expenditures, which is a system that may increase confidence within regions and beyond, owing to the transparency by making figures publicly available. Now, I realize that the report operates in a similar way to the UN Register of Arms Transfer, which is also limited to a transparency role. However, the fact that serious efforts are made to achieve a UN arms trade treaty with the power to actually regulate trade also makes me wonder if there isn't any equivalent treaty established to regulate excessive military spending. So my question is, if it is possible to have a legally binding instrument that will prohibit nuclear weapons financing and actually implement such treaties in national policies. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that interesting question. I'm going to take one more from Arthur Duforest, and then I'll turn back to the speakers.
Yes. Hi. Hello. Thank you all. My question has a little. There are 3 points that I wanted to make before asking my question. First of all, there's a big lack of public support to the issue of denuclearization and non-proliferation, and a lot of issues take the spotlight. I'm mainly thinking of global warming being one of them, for example. And that's a dual threat that the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists has reported upon, saying, linking very much the problem of nuclear proliferation with global warming. And then, of course, there is the problem of having an unmanageable arsenal. I'm thinking mainly of the United States, who has a large amount of ICBMs, for example, that is too high for them to handle properly or supervise properly. So keeping that in mind, what would the prospect for transition of nuclear warheads into nuclear fuel? What would the prospect of well, not treaty, but would it be possible, or would it be even feasible to start a campaign that would aim at reducing the number of warheads and transforming that into nuclear fuel for nuclear energy?
Excellent. Well, thank you for your question. I'm going to turn to Ambassador Zlovinen to kick us off, if he's happy to do that, and then we'll go around the panels. I see also that there have been some raised hands, so rest assured they are also on my list.
Thank you, Sebastian. Glad to try to answer some of the questions, very interesting questions. I believe that the challenges we face as an international community obviously are basically global challenges. And the last question was related also to the linkage between global warming and nuclear proliferation or the nuclear challenges. And always I say that, it's the threat posed by nuclear weapons and the existence of nuclear weapons, the threat of its potential use, and the threat of nuclear proliferations is a global challenge, as such, like global warming and many others, have to be addressed on a global basis. And that's require cooperation, understanding, but also dialogue and sometimes even disagreement among state parties, but what you need is dialogue. And I believe that you, as the younger generation, the youth, I think you can also help, pushing your governments to promote that dialogue. You can do it among yourself, but also you can generate, lobby efforts for your respective governments to engage with other governments in that dialogue. I think this is what we are trying to do in the preparation to the 10th review conference, working very closely with the High Representative and her teams, as well as members of the Bureau. We are trying to promote a dialogue among state parties of the NPT to address all these very crucial issues, understanding that it will be, and there are differences of views and positions, and rightly so. As a country have different national interests, and not necessarily see eye to eye on those issues. But that should not prevent them from having just an open discussion on those issues and hopefully trying to reach a common denominator on how best to tackle them. So I think that the youth has a lot to play here, and I say that not only creating those networks that Bianca was mentioning, but also being more proactive in your own countries, establishing first, obviously you have to get the skills and knowledge and expertise, as Ms. Nakamisu was saying, but also saying that to debate, to develop your own views and ideas and express them. Yes. Second, let me very briefly try to answer the question by Amir on the nuclear weapon-free zones. And yes, Tlatelolco, and being an Argentine, being from Latin America and the Caribbean, I'm very proud that that was the very first nuclear weapon-free zone ever to be established. And it's a well-respected one, and it was followed by many other ones. And it's a good example when there is a political will by a number of countries to get rid of these awful weapons, you can achieve that. But also that requires a sense of, in that case, regional security stability, because without that, it's almost impossible to have a dialogue about banning nuclear weapons. But also there too, I believe that, and Amir mentioned the cross-regional exchanges, and there are meetings between and among the different nuclear weapons free zones. I think the High Representative can explain a bit more how it works, but it's also under the auspices of the UN. And there is, I believe, a General Assembly First Committee resolution on that. And that exchange, can also be replicated at the level of youth. I think just the youth, representative of that new generations that belong to countries that belong to those nuclear weapon-free zones also, take the initiative and start exchanging views and collaborations on that one. On the postponement of the review conference, what we can do, as I said, is just promote dialogue, promote cooperations, and try to have change the narrative in the sense that we have seen the last 2 years or more a very negative narrative, coming from very important state parties, but also from some sectors, some quarters. I think that it is our responsibility as obviously the UN, as President designate, but you as a member of the younger generation to help change that narrative into a much more positive, optimistic, and forward-looking one. And last but not least, on the unbalanced treatment of the 3 pillars, I think Orion mentioned that, and I fully agree and always say that. The NPT is not a perfect treaty. The 3 pillars have been dealt with by the state parties in an unbalanced way. Probably we're never going to have an equally balanced treatment and dealing with that, but at least my intention as President designate is to try to balance up, just to push up what I say, for example, the discussions on the 3rd pillar on the peaceful uses of nuclear energy. And I believe that there is a lot of pressure by a large majority of state parties, in particular from NAM, but also from the WEOC, that they are totally disappointed, discouraged, and also outraged by the lack of progress on nuclear disarmament. So also had to be, there is going to be a tension between the different pillars, but I think just if we try to balance up, it's going to be just a better outcome. I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'll just kindly ask that anyone who's joined the conversation recently, just make sure you're muted and that your video is turned off for us. Thank you. I'll pass over now to Ms. Ayun Lim, who's kindly taking questions on behalf of Ambassador Cho Hyun from the Republic of Korea. I think you're muted.
Okay, yeah. Now you can hear me? Okay, so thank you for giving me a chance to answer some of the questions raised by the young people. I would like to answer the question from my dear colleague Amir from Malaysia. So in order to have a better linkage to cross-regional learning in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation, I believe that establishing a platform for youth, for the young people to have interconnection and have the exchange of opinions. And I think that's in line of the UN ODA's projects to establish a platform in online and in other in-person meetings. So Republic of Korea also is cooperating closely with UN ODA in establishing a platform for youth to have engagement and participation. And now we are contributing to a project with UN ODA to create a website on the website independently for the youth to discuss on the matter of the disarmament non-proliferation. And I believe that project is now developing and it will be launched soon. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll hand over now to Bianca and then we'll do another round of questions.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what was just said in regard to the question of how to leverage cross-regional engagement of youth networks. And as I previously said, I think in this instance, institutionalization is key in order to move forward in a more organized way towards achieving youth engagement as much as we can. So I'm looking forward to it as well, and to engage the Latin American network that I coordinated these past months with other networks that are already established or that are being established recently to discuss about these topics and leverage engagement worldwide. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. And Ms. Nakamitsu, did you want to come in on those questions before I turn back to the audience?
Okay, thank you. No, these are really excellent questions, all of them. It's very difficult to respond to just one of them. So let me try to address some of those from our perspectives. The cross-regional learning, absolutely important. And I actually personally think that these nuclear weapon-free zones are, it can be much more sort of usefully exploited in terms of how to advance nuclear weapon-free zone, free world globally. We have taken some initiatives in this regard. We run this with the support of Kazakhstan. We did a workshop about a year ago to learn from the various experiences in different regions. Just last week, in the context of this work related to Middle East free zone, we also run a 3-day webinar to learn from various experiences, those who negotiated nuclear weapon-free zones in different parts of the world came together and share lessons from those things. So we need to replicate something like that also at the youth level. And that's one of the reasons. It's not just about the free zone, but cross-regional learning we think is a very important dimensions. I mentioned about the youth champions, and this is one of the reasons why we are building in a geographically balanced network of those champions so that they can share their experiences and lessons and a form of a cross-regional learning at the young people's level can be also replicated in that group. Young people's role in COVID-19, let me just also say, address partly a question from Palesa's issue, military expenditure spending issues. I don't know if you are aware, but CIPRI recently published this report on military spending. And in that, we noticed something very important, which is that because of the COVID-19 related challenges across the world, there will be, we hope, a window of opportunity to really look at the military expenditure spending side of the national budget. All these governments will have other requirements to tackle COVID-19 related challenges. So there will be a greater fiscal pressure. So we want to turn this into an opportunity to indeed look at whether the current extremely high military spending is the appropriate way of looking at our security in the post-COVID-19 period. We want to put humans more at the center of security. So what you can do, young people, we want you to engage in discussions domestically, raise your concerns, start dialogues, debates at your communities, talk to your, Congress people, your parliamentarians, etc., to deepen discussions at the national level about how you see the security and how you think will be the appropriate military spending, etc. All these things can actually then come together at the international level to hopefully link with a greater sort of awareness of importance of diplomacy, dialogue, negotiations, rather than simply spending or investing in military equipment, military expenditure. So I think what you can do at the community level, national level, will have all the very important contributions which we will hopefully be able to generate through your activities. Finally, I would like to also say that this is a very informed, it really shows that you are already quite well-informed audience. And you are aware of the military modernization, including in nuclear arsenals. I think what is now becoming quite apparent is that there is an awareness across the world, whether, which side you're coming from, which region you're coming from. I think there is a greater awareness and understanding that there is a need for a new vision in arms control and disarmament. The world has changed dramatically, and therefore we need to actually take a look at what are the new challenges around international security. And that debate has to also start. I'm not going to go into details, but more innovative ideas, creative ideas, and also not just looking at disarmament in silo, in a technical silo, but more strategically across different, if you will, different categories of disarmament discussions. There's nuclear, there's science and technology, there are outer space, missiles. All these things together make tools for arms, new sort of vision for arms control, and they need to be looked at more comprehensively. And I hope that you will be able to take a greater interest in those new approaches. What are the things that we should be thinking about? So Sorry, I took some time to respond, but back to you.
Thank you. That's great. So we're due to end the meeting at past. I've got 6 questions left, so my suggestion is we'll take them all. I'm going to ask all of the audience members asking questions to please be concise in asking your question. The floor is now closed. And then I'll ask each of our panelists to respond to whichever they think is most appropriate. Please don't feel you need to answer every question each, or repeat if other people have already kind of covered the topic. So my next question is from Nahisa Shibuya.
Hello, thank you very much. I'd like to firstly thank UNODA, BASIC, and panelists for this important event. And I'd like to briefly share 2 points and 1 question. And firstly, please let me share that in the context of the review conference, Japan made a joint statement on disarmament and non-proliferation education on behalf of the 55 countries at the 3rd Preparatory Committee. And we plan to make an updated statement in the upcoming review conference. So participation from other countries and support from the youth would be most welcome. And secondly, we believe that it is crucially important to promote awareness and listen to voices among the youth on variety of perspectives, including the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of the use of nuclear weapons, as well as threat, risks, and challenges posed by nuclear proliferation. And finally, 1 question to panelists regarding relation between education and the active role of the youth. So how would you think we could best interrelate and jointly promote our ongoing effort on nuclear disarmament, non-proliferation education, and the activities of the youth in the context of the review conference? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question on education there. I'm going to pass over immediately to Emily Enright. Nice to see you.
Hi, thanks very much, Sebastian, and thanks to all of the panelists. It's a real pleasure to be here and to have you here. I'll be brief. It seems that the ultimate hurdle for engagement for youth is inclusion in high-level track 1.5 or even track 1 multilateral events. The best way for youth to advocate for our interests and contribute to critical issues as agents is to have a seat at the table. Governments can be hesitant to include civil society in discussions of critical security issues, let alone youth. How can we tackle this hurdle and enable young people to become substantive contributors at key NPT events, such as RevCons and PrepCons? Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Jenny Nielsen.
Hi, good afternoon from Vienna. Thank you to BASIC and the UNODA for this very timely webinar, and thanks to the speakers for their insight. As mentioned by you, Seb, and Ambassador Slovenian, today marks 75 years since the Trinity nuclear test. So my question is, what can be done at the 10th NPT review conference and ahead of it to continue to highlight the need to put an end to nuclear testing and to promote the pending ratifications of the CTBT so we and future generations don't witness any further nuclear tests? Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Nice to see you. I've got a question now from Walid Helmi. Walid, are you there? Okay. Well, if you do come, we'll come back to you. I'm going to move over to Mustafiz Ahmed. Mustafiz? Okay.
Hello. Hello,
Hi.
everyone.
There we
Mustafiz from Bangladesh and South Asia. Hello. Yeah. Sorry about this. I'm Mustafiz, working with PNND as a South Asia Youth Program Coordinator, as well as the Parliamentary Council Secretary. We realize that South Asia there is 2 countries having nuclear weapons, India and Pakistan. What does the United Nations Office for Disarmament Affairs take action to sort out this problem? And Bangladesh is also a neighbor country of South Asia, so we have very much possibility to face the impact or Holocaust impact of nuclear weapon if there are any accident or any war or something happen in this region. And second one is the youth issue, youth education. I have done some survey on Bangladeshi youth, and the survey's results are alarming that Bangladeshi youth are also thinking that Bangladesh should have nuclear weapon, as our two neighboring country having this already. So we working on South Asian youth, I faced some alarming topic that we badly needed the youth peace education at very early age in South Asia region. So what is the steps are going to take by UN or United Nations or Disarmament Affairs Office about this youth education? And PNND also launched a program in last IPU Assembly of Dhaka in 2016 about youth program that is working as a connecting bridge between youth and parliamentarians. So what if UN support this in other region or other country to engaging youth with the parliamentarians to work with peace and disarmament sectors? Thank you.
Thank you. Question now from Tony Jaquez. Just sorry if I've mispronounced anyone's names today. I do apologise. Hi, Tony.
Yeah. Thank you.
Apologies.
Thank you so much to all the panelists for their insights. I wanted to make a couple of reminders, but also provide maybe one avenue for your comments regarding the question that has been recurrent today, which is how to incorporate young people in the dialogue, because I don't think that there is anybody that is questioning the pertinence and the crucial importance of young people participating in the NPT process, but also in all other disarmament processes. And of course, the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda has already mandated that participation. But how can we do it? That is the question. So I wanted to comment first that I am always amazed that in international meetings about disarmament, there is hardly ever a mention about Resolution 5081 on youth delegates. So the General Assembly has already recommended governments to include young people as delegates of their delegations so that they can take part in the decision-making process of their own participation. Of course, this has to be done with care and with attention to security details, etc. Okay, so it depends on each government. But all the governments already include young people in their delegations. But the drama for me is that they are almost all the time devoted to human rights issues, to development issues, to environmental issues. And very few governments devote these delegates to their delegations to peace and security affairs. So here is my first reminder, but also maybe a recommendation. I don't know if Ambassador Slauvinen agrees or Madam Nakamitsu agrees, that maybe there can be a recommendation to delegations to include young people in their delegations so that they can have a substantive participation, because the problem is not only to have the participation of young people, but a substantive participation in the decision-making process so that they can contribute really, not only with the dialogues amongst themselves and networks, which are very useful, but so that there is a linkage between those deliberations and the decisions that governments are going to be taking in the end. And I finalize my comment by also making a reminder that this year is also the 20th anniversary of the study for education for disarmament that was promoted 20 years ago. And Mexico is the main sponsor of the resolution every 2 years to remind countries to present a report to the Secretary General on what they do for disarmament education. And last year we negotiated with our very good friends of the Republic of Korea on how to make this issue compatible with the participation of young people, because disarmament and disarmament education is crucial for young people to participate in the end. So this is a reminder also of that issue, but also a plea to all governments to present reports on what they do on disarmament education, so that the circle is complete and we fulfill already the commitments in resolutions of the General Assembly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tony. Okay, so we're due to end at past. I have one more question on my list, so I'm going to give you 30 seconds, Marius, to ask your question, and then we're going to overrun by no more than 5 minutes. So I will press each of our speakers to respond to what they can. Marius.
Okay, thank you so much. I hope you guys can hear me. I'm Marius Chonang from South Africa here. So my question is really about the whole issue of disarmament. I think so far we can say South Africa is one of, or not the only country that has actually shown an example of disarmament on really destroying their nuclear weapon. Then when I look at the whole panel here, I've seen only, let me use the word the way we put it, I have seen only white people in the panel. I'm asking myself, does it mean we don't have any nuclear disarmament specialists from Africa? Or how does a young person from Africa relate to this whole presentation when it seems like we are not really included in this whole discussion? And we all know that there's been a lot of nuclear testing happening on the African continent in the past. So how does a young African person relate to this whole discussion? Thank you.
Thank you, Marius. A really important question. Okay, so I'm going to pass over now. We're going to do it in reverse order. We'll start with Bianca. We'll then pass over to Hyun, then Gustavo, and then finally Ms. Nakamitsu. Please finish us off, and I'll say a few closing remarks. Bianca.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to answer to the question regarding education, and to say that it is of great importance that governments, the nuclear industry, research institutes, NGOs, international organizations, and so on, from all the different areas of the nuclear sector, enhance internship opportunities, young professional programs, and mentor programs for youth worldwide. I think that that would be a great step towards enhancing education in the sector for information exchange and as well intergenerational dialogue. Thank you.
Over to you.
Okay, I suppose this will also serve as the closing remarks from my part. I was, as an expert, I was the one who actually was involved in making the text to the resolution. So I'm very thrilled to see the active participation of youth to this seminar, and I hope to have many more like this. And with regards to the nuclear disarmament education, as you can see on my resolution presented by the Republic of Korea, we also highlight the importance of education among youth on the field of disarmament and non-proliferation. So taking this opportunity, I encourage all the youth people to go back to your country, to your communities, to use this resolution as a basis to call for the leaders to engage more actively with the youth. I thank you.
Ambassador Slobodan.
Thank you. Many very interesting questions. So just a couple of concepts about that. How best to help the youth to have a say at the table? Very important questions. I don't have the answer. I think there will be many answers. It will be up to each government to decide. But I think just the more active the youth are, I think that the more you get attention from the governments, and probably the more you will be enticed or asked to participate. It's true that in most cases, civil society don't have a place at the delegations, although some delegations include civil societies, including Argentinians delegations on climate change, on human rights, on the rights of women. So they do have an opportunity to participate in delegations, not in all, I have to say, but I think that this is, I agree, this is a challenge. And I hope that to see at the 10th review conference, more youth representative at the delegations. But you have to fight for that space. They're not going to give it to you. We're not just, it's, talking from a representative of the older generations, 30, 35 years ago, I was in your position, and it was not easy for me also to try to make my own space and my voice heard. But I think just I did it in my own small, limited availability. But I think just it's the willpower that youth have, that you can move things beyond your limitations. So I push you to do that. Secondly, what we can do just to raise more, just in terms of awareness, education is a key issue, and I salute the resolution by Japan on this, and the work done by South Korea, obviously. But also, for example, we are promoting, and BASIC is working with us very, very strongly, to have in the margins of the NPT review conference, whenever it's going to happen, but it will happen, a forum dedicated to the NPT and the next generation. That will be the NPT and the next generation forum. So I think just that also should have a big impact, and show the governments that youth matter. And finally, before my 2 seconds closing remarks, just to an answer to our colleague from South Africa. You're right. We have to promote a better participation from African youth. But let me tell you that we have already organized 2 workshops on the NPTs in the past, and before the pandemic put a halt to our work in person. One was in South Africa himself. I was about to go to South Africa for that important regional workshop with your colleagues from the whole continent, and then I couldn't because I was asked to brief the Security Council with Madame Nakamisu urgently, so I couldn't go, but I sent my representative, and it was a very important workshops that addressed the needs and the positions of all African countries, and it was organized by South Africa. Another workshop on the NPT was organized in Ethiopia, and we're planning another one for Egypt soon. I think there was a webinar on peaceful applications of nuclear energy 2 weeks ago, and there were 3 members of the panel. 2 of them were the Deputy Foreign Minister of South Africa and the Deputy Foreign Minister of Egypt. So I think just you have a point, sir. You have a point, but also I think there are other opportunities in where brilliant Africans and South Africans, youth and not that young, are being engaged in this conversation, and I'm very pleased to see that. Finally, again, to reiterate that you guys, the youth, you are the future custodians of the NPT. And you have to lead, you have to guide the non-proliferation and disarmament regime throughout its next 50 years. So therefore, we, the older generation, we have to ensure that you, the youth, have the opportunity to get the knowledge, the insight, and the experience. But you need to think creatively. We cannot make that one. We cannot enforce that. I think it's our responsibility to give you the opportunities, as Bianca said, that establishing mentorships, establishing the internships, and there are many the UN already has. But we cannot, just force on you or even help you create, just think creatively about the future of the NPT. That is your challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Finally, over to Ms. Nakamitsu for the final remarks.
Okay, thank you. My fellow panelists have spoken so well and responded to many of those questions. I want to also echo Gustavo's remarks about how to actually be at the table of negotiations. This is a very important issue. Tony also mentioned it very well, that they need to be also included in the national delegations. And I know that there are many countries, governments that are in fact doing that, including youth person as part of their national delegations. But I also agree with Gustavo, you have to demand it. Move your governments. You demand your own rightful seat at the table, because I believe that you can actually contribute. As I said, we need new perspectives, more creative ideas. And it's much more likely that those creative approaches actually come from younger people. So I hope that you will be forceful in asking for involvement and participation in the negotiation, and therefore be part of a decision-making platforms. I very much agree with the link, with the education, disarmament education. We now have much more sort of useful tools. I mean, now, it's online platforms that are readily available. So there are many more opportunities for disarmament education and for younger people's learning in those areas. But we also need to make sure that it will be, if you will, more diverse opportunities that includes networking, the skills education, and also in-person visits, etc. And I think internship, someone mentioned internship opportunities, and we are very keen to continue to have a very dynamic internship programs at ODA, and I hope that other organizations will do the same. And those are very critical experience-based learning opportunities, and that also forms a very important part of the linkage between education and empowerment of younger people. CTBT, Jenny asked the CTBT, we were very encouraged to see that many of those friends of CTBTs now also taking initiatives to make sure that nuclear testing issue will be again highlighted. I myself participated at a ministerial level webinar just last week, initiated by the Netherlands foreign minister. And I really hope that many of those opportunities will be taken up so that we will continue to push for early ratification and entry into force of CTBT. That is a very, very important part of our nuclear disarmament regime, if you will. And finally, a question and remarks from our colleague in South Africa. I mentioned the Youth Championship, Youth Champion for Disarmament initiative. Out of 10, indeed, 3 were from Africa. What I wanted to emphasize is that our African colleagues, both at the member states level, but also at the youth level, are indeed very important part of our global efforts. South Africa has always been very important contributor in nuclear disarmament field, but obviously going beyond. Disarmament is not just a nuclear. There are very, very important work being done in small arms conventional weapons side. And many of the indeed expertise come from African continent, and we are very keen to have those expertise and substantive contributions made available at the global level. And you have a huge amount of contributions that you can continue to make, and I hope that there will be awareness amongst your colleagues in South Africa and also in the African continent, so that more younger people will indeed continue to participate in our global movement. It was a very exciting webinar. I'm so happy that there is such a strong energy, passion, and dynamism. And I think this will be a beginning of a very important and very indeed exciting and important work So I hope that you will stay engaged, and from UNODA side, I can definitely make a very strong a statement that we will remain very actively involved, and we will even further increase our engagement in this area of work. So thank you very much from us.
Well, thank you so much. This has been a really interesting event from my perspective. A lot of good ideas there. I think the overarching question of how to encourage more participation, not just that we need to, but how do we do that, is something we all need to go away and reflect on. Some of the answers that I heard today were more fora, whether online or offline, for ideas to be shared, more funding to help young people into the field and to retain their participation, more education initiatives, more young people on delegations, whether that's track 1 or 1.5, more reforms to working environments to make them attractive and safe places to be, and more opportunities, particularly for those from the Global South. I heard also some really interesting new ideas and questions, including around a legally binding treaty to regulate excessive military spending, and a great question about how to keep devaluing nuclear weapons in the discourse. And finally, I was struck by this idea of the joint responsibility of both youth and governments to promote youth participation in this field. Neither one side can do it on their own. This needs to be a partnership across generations. So without further ado, thank you to our 4 speakers, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, I've done it again, Ms. Izumi Nakamitsu, His Excellency Ambassador Gustavo Zlavanen, His Excellency Ambassador Cho Hyun, and Bianca Carpenelli. Thank you also to UNODA for hosting this great event, and I'd note Soo Hyun Kim, Rene Holbach, and Christopher King, and also to my colleagues at BASIC, Marion Messmer and Marina Favreau, for their work behind the scenes on the event. If you'd like to follow UNODA or BASIC, you can find us both on Twitter at UN_disarmament or at basic_INT, or you can go to the footer of the BASIC website to find our mailing list, or to the UNODA website for theirs, and we're also on Facebook and LinkedIn. Finally, I want to thank you, over 150 of you, for coming to listen to this event and for asking your questions. Please get in touch if you'd like to speak more, and if you have ideas of how we can build this work outwards. So wishing you all very good health and a very good morning, afternoon, or evening, no matter where you are.